Good evening, treasure seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me, as always, from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Good evening. I think we're both finally almost healthy, so we won't be complaining about that anymore, and you won't have to listen to us cough anymore. It's a win-win.
Excellent. Cody, how's it going for you?
Good. I made acai bowls tonight because it's
Yeah.
freezing and I want to pretend like it's warm and I'm somewhere tropical. But we've got a NutriBullet, which is like the magic bullet, the little personal blenders,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a pretty new one, but it's something's wrong with it. And when I pull like the top part off, the bottom part, like the motor doesn't stop spinning, and it's kind of freaky.
Oh, wow.
It's really
But
scary.
the blade is inside, though, right? It's not like it's
Yeah.
But it's still freaky.
Things are wild over
Things
here.
are crazy. You're buying chicken off the side of the road, and then now you're doing a NutriBullet.
Yeah.
Craigslist chicken.
How are you?
Good.
What's new for you?
When you ask me how I am, I guess my response always has to do with food somehow.
Good. Yeah, I've taken quite a few days off of this. There's treasure inside, I would say. Probably my longest break so far. So when I got back into the mailbag today, I was very inspired by all the good emails that we've been getting. So we'll cover them over the course of future episodes in this episode. But yeah, really good and fresh eyes that I'll have for working on the past and future box mega episode, next episode, the marathon episode.
You bet you're excited for that.
So yeah,
It's your bread and butter.
Have a fresh perspective. It was nice. So yeah, I'm a little behind, and yeah, apologies to folks that have sent in emails that we haven't responded to yet, but we're getting through them. I got through about half the backlog today. So anyway, you'll expect to hear a response from me in the next day or two for anybody that's missing a response. Also, just on a positive note, everybody in the email bag is so nice to us, and they say how much they like the podcast and they like our format. So this is not an invitation for people to send mean emails now, but I appreciate all of the kind words that everybody sends. So that's super nice. Thank you.
It is very nice. It's an encouraging inbox to jump into, and it's much more fun than my other inboxes.
Work email.
Thank you for work and personal. It's nice to hear from people who are also excited about the treasure hunt.
Yeah, so thanks to all the listeners. Yeah, very good. Should we jump into news? Heavy news episode today. I think you're going to kick us off, though, Cody. Is that all right?
Yeah, I just got a couple pretty minor things here, but could be interesting. One of them was just, and I think, Bryn, you actually read the actual email. I just read a secondhand account of the email. I think it's from the JCB's email list, where he talked about, some books are back in stock and people are getting them, but there's been some reports of like some poor handling during the shipping process and some of the dust jackets getting kind of beat up. So I think in the email he was offering to replace dust jackets for anyone who needed their dust jacket replaced. Is that right, Bryn? I think that was right.
Yeah, he called out Amazon specifically a few times, saying that they were delivering books
coyly.
Damaged. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's news, but I think the bigger implication there is like, was he so worried about that dust jacket? That's the first thing that I thought about, because yeah, there's lots of things that could be changed in the books and stuff, but he seems to be willing to send out a whole email about the dust jacket. So we know about the little what kind of poem is it?
Haiku
or not haiku? Definitely not
haiku-esque
inside the dust jacket. So that's the first bit of news. Could be interesting and something to think about beyond just the news side of it. And the second thing I wanted to touch on, because it's the first time I had seen reference to it, there's a reference in the subreddit about a poetry account of potentially Jon Collins-Black's, like the name's Jon Collins-Black, and it's on medium.com, and it lists like a bunch of poems that are clearly about the treasure hunt, but it seems like this is fake. People are
Yeah.
reporting that it's fake. It seems like very obviously fake. I saw a secondhand account of someone saying that JCB has said it's fake, but I didn't see him actually, like, where he actually said it, but I'm pretty sure it's fake. So if you see that and you get all excited, don't get all excited because it's not real. And it's a little too on the nose.
Yeah. Okay. No, I had not heard of that. So thank you for reporting. We try to report all of the misleading information here so that you guys are aware and don't fall into a trap that might waste a day or two of your time. So good,
Yeah.
good
I'll have to
reporting.
send you the link because they're very on the nose poems about it.
Okay, yeah, let's try to remember to put the link in the description, video description, if we can. That's great. And we'll mark it fake with capital letters. Okay. Yeah, going back to the dust jacket, I know we had talked about an episode or two ago about the differences in the dust jacket that are on the electronic version, the ebook version. Maybe the dust jacket for version or third edition is different. I was under the impression that maybe the third edition didn't even have a dust jacket, but we got an email in the mailbag that said that there was a dust jacket. So I forget who sent that. I apologize. But yeah, somebody sent that in, and then you guys also have gotten a third edition. Is that right?
Yeah, that just showed up today. Yeah, today.
Okay.
So I haven't done like much of a deep dive comparing too much yet, but I went in and just checked for a couple like what I would have said were super obvious typos that I would have just expected to be updated between our first edition and third edition. So like I checked the Hopi calendar, that was up to date, and I will say in the the Forrest Fenn chapter,
Yeah.
it still says Santa Fe, Arizona. So like what?
That
I
doesn't
also
make any
double checked
sense.
today, and I had thought that it was one of the ones that was listed on the website as like one of the typos that he's acknowledging, and I didn't see it there. So at this point, I'm like, all right, if it's not on the website and it's made it through 3 editions, and it's kind of an obvious one as is, it's like
I
making me
don't know,
question
like it
things.
has to be a
Just
clue, right? It just seems like too weird and obvious. But
yeah,
also for that same reason, like how would you not correct that by a third edition?
right. He just wants you to
So
buy the fourth edition.
maybe. Yeah,
Okay.
I was pretty stumped by that one.
Yeah, I think in other news, there's been a release of the American Treasure podcast, episode 3. Highly recommend that everybody listen to that episode, particularly the second half where he has a small interview with Jon Collins-Black. And I haven't listened to the other episodes yet, which is probably a big mistake. There's a guy that's friends with Jon Collins-Black that has interviewed him, I think, in the past. These are older interviews, I believe. And he's putting bits and pieces of those interviews in each episode, is my understanding. But episode 3 particularly has quite a bit of information that we as the seekers can find useful, I believe. So I have a list of 4 things, and these 4 things I've edited slightly from a nice list that K-Pro from the Calazars Grand Adventure Discord and the Calazars YouTube page put together, that I'm going to recap here. So credit to K-Pro for these little nuggets here. The first one, there is a description that Jon Collins-Black gives in the interview, kind of about it doesn't, he's not specific about it being like this is what you should look for, but he mentions certain things that are very specific about what a treasure hunter might be looking at in nature. So he mentions observing nature like rock formations and intensive use of Google Maps that he did before going out to on site to hide the treasures. So I think that's helpful for us, knowing that he was using Google Maps as a resource for where he wanted to hide the treasures. So that is actually really good information for us to know, as Google Maps is a very appropriate methodology for our approach to looking for some of these treasures. at least as a starting point. Obviously, you still need to go boots on the ground, because he does mention look at rock formations, and that's not specific to saying that's a clue, but he mentions it. So that could be very important. Secondly, he said that any of the seekers can remain anonymous. So he emphasized that there is incentives, and we still don't know what those incentives are, for contacting him if you do find the treasure. It was very clear that he's not going to go out and look to see if his treasures are found, because I think he's under way too strong of magnifying glass to do that safely. So anyway, I think that's information that we already knew, that there's some sort of incentive. There was no new information about what that incentive is. And he was very clear he's not going to go out and look for these treasures again to see if they've been found. The third one is, this is a big one. So the Forrest Fenn box, and Bryn, you have your vindication here, I believe. The Forrest Fenn box is in one of the Forrest Fenn states. So New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. And it's very clear that it's there. And the interesting thing is that he analyzes his first stanza in the Forrest Fenn poem as part of the Forrest Fenn box. When asked by the interviewer, he says, he recites the whole stanza and says, where he was looking for heavy loads. That's not verbatim, but and so he's basically confirming that it's in one of the 4 states, because it's in the Forrest Fenn box is based on where he was doing searching historically. So that's, I think, quite important information from this interview. And then finally, and this is more for some of the Forrest Fenn treasure seekers from the original Forrest Fenn treasure hunt, there was a bit of controversy about what is contained in the olive jar, that only Forrest Fenn knows what's in there, and only Jon Collins-Black now knows what's in there. He was the one to open it and reseal it. He's the only one that's read the autobiography that's in there. And basically he confirmed that there is a second poem that was in the autobiography, which was important because that's supposedly one of the indicators that Forrest Fenn had originally, as once the treasure is found, there's supposedly a poem in there that only the finder will know, and would confirm that that information would confirm that they had actually found the Forrest Fenn treasure. So that is maybe not as pertinent to this hunt, because there's not any more details other than some tying up loose ends, let's say, of some of the Forrest Fenn hunt controversy about whether or not certain people found the box. I don't want to get into that, but anyway, that was big news to the Forrest Fenn community, I would say. But the first 3 certainly are pertinent to this hunt. Any thoughts on that?
I think they all stand out as being pretty big pieces of information to include in the hunt. I think what I will probably continue to fall back on the most is the Google Maps component, just thinking through, how he would be using it in his mind. Obviously looking for like distinguishing things to help build out his thought process, building clues. So I think that's just super helpful as we obviously use it as a tool as a hunter.
Right. So yeah, highly recommend. We'll post a link to that episode, or at least we're going to post the Apple podcast version. And I think there's also another version on Instagram that has links, but that's American Treasure Podcast. So look that up, follow along, because I think you might be able to extract additional information from that interview as well. It's pretty useful. All right, should we dive into horseshoes and hand grenades? All right, I will be covering horseshoes and hand grenades today. So this is one of the approaches that our team has been working on. Cody brought up the idea of the Mad magazine page folding approach to the word search and potentially the cryptogram that's in the past and future box. So a part 2 box. I thought it was a really cool approach and was bolstered by it slightly because of the mention of don't be upset. And as you know, I've used upset for the trouble board, the infamous trouble board solve. But upset would also be a synonym for Mad Magazine. And let me pull up the image again, Cody, that you had shared with us a couple episodes ago. So this is the Mad Magazine page folding approach representation here, where you would have a page in the magazine, Mad Magazine, and you would fold these red arrows here at the top and at the bottom, and then it would make a new image and it would modify this poem so that it reads something different. So overall, like just looking at the layout of this page and looking at the layout of the Mad Magazine, there's a poem at the bottom in the cryptogram, and then there's a word search instead of a image at the top. But potentially by folding that in a different way, you might get a different message either out of the word search or out of the cryptogram. So let me show you just quickly what I've been working on. Basically what I did is I took a scanned copy of the word search page here and basically trimmed the page in every possible combination. So you can see it's a little bit messy here, but you can see I have different chunks of the word search vertically cut, and then I can slide them over on top of the word search to cover part of the word search and then combine some of that poem together. And so I have a better representation of that, the one I was most excited about here in the next image. And the reason that I was excited with this particular orientation was mainly because it says Welcome Arch at the top. And to me, that seemed like that's cool because it takes that kind of odd wording for welcome to word search and makes a different phrase out of that, Welcome Arch. And so I was initially pretty excited about that. Unfortunately, when I do this, and I do this with other approaches as well, like the other cut up, like vertical cuts that I've made as well, I'm not able to generate too many new words out of the word search. So you can take, a quick moment and look to see what you have. I mean, there's tree here now. I think there's a few other words, maybe backwards or forwards as well. I've looked at this way too long though, so I can't remember exactly what I found in this particular instance. And then you can see that the cryptogram at the bottom also has a pretty good alignment, I would say, but unfortunately it does not add any content, I would say, to that cryptogram. The thing I haven't tried is maybe try to resolve the cryptogram with the new lettering at the bottom to see if we could get a reasonable message out of that. And then the other thing I've been looking at is the part where it says you may ignore all 3-letter words and some proper nouns to see if there's a different message there. But you can see here it says you may ignore all TE proper nouns. So that doesn't really make any sense, but I think there's still some legs here. I want to spend a bit more time this weekend working on this, but I really think it's a cool approach, Cody. Nothing fruitful yet that I'm too happy about, but that doesn't mean I've exhausted all of the options here. Anyway, I think this is a cool idea, and I'm still going to work on it a bit more. And potentially, if I have any goodies that I find, they'll be reported on Thursday for the Past and Future Mega episode.
Yeah, I like this because I feel like it falls, and this is like going back to original episodes, it falls kind of in that sweet spot of like what could JCB be doing to this word search to add in additional layers of puzzle without making it exponentially harder. That was something Cody is very passionate about. And I feel like this kind of falls into that zone of here's a whole new layer of puzzle and solve aspect without just getting like insanely difficult to make it all work together.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Cody? You still
Yeah,
like it?
I like it a lot. And full disclosure, when we talked about this a couple episodes ago, I did not catch that on the original Mad Magazine page, there was text at the bottom too that lined up.
Yeah.
I had only looked at like the top picture part. So that seems like a really, really strong evidence that this could be like a legitimate method of getting a clue. I like that a lot. And then also, I can't remember if we talked about it last time we talked about the Mad Magazine fold in or not, but your take on his phrasing of "don't be upset," and then upset being kind of synonymous with mad. I think there's a lot of really strong ties there, and seeing what you're doing has got me a lot more excited about it than I was the first time I talked about it.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about, you said, like looking into that cryptogram at the bottom, if it can be resolved. And I think that by the time that you do the fold in, you're gonna have so few characters there that I don't know there's gonna be enough context to create a new cryptogram. So I'd be surprised if that ends up working out. But other than that, yeah, no, it's all exciting, and yeah, I'm more excited about it now than I was before.
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, the title, Welcome to Word Search. I think I'd be more excited about that title becoming its new title if we didn't have like a clear connection for why that was kind of awkward phrasing. Welcome to Word Search with the Zork connection.
Right.
Regardless, I do like that new headline. I would have been excited about that too, that new title. And I think it kind of ties in nicely with some of our solve that we'll be getting into in the next episode as well.
Right. I didn't think
Guaranteed,
about
if I was the one who came across that new title, it would have been an SOS text: buy your plane tickets.
Buy plane tickets now.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, a little teaser, I guess, for next episode when we do the past and future box deep dive. We're planning to do a full analysis of the word search to get everybody up to speed on some of the more common solves, let's say, and kind of I'm at least going to present what I think are the best approaches so far. If you've been watching Discord or watching other, content, there's some approaches that seem way too far to me, and so I'll definitely mention some of those, and it will be our opinion, basically what we think is reasonable, what we think is not reasonable. So yeah, lots of controversy is probably too strong of a word, but lots of ideas floating around on different methodologies to go over the word search, and we'll be presenting ours pretty clearly, so that if you are not deeply involved in the past and future box chapter, that at least will get you up to speed on some of the more common things that I'd say most people agree on at this point. So hopefully that will be good orientation. And then Bryn's hinting at a potential solve that we'll be presenting as well that we're excited about. So anyway, that's why that episode is going to be really long, just because we have a lot to cover. So excited for that next episode. All right, should we dive into the mailbag? Other ones.
Mailbag. We've got mail.
All right, so we got 3 mailbags that we're going to cover today, all fairly quick, so that's why we're able to do 3. First one I wanted to cover, actually, I'm going to change the order here a little bit. The first one we should cover is probably an email from Scott. So Scott responded to the Charles Loloma mural. So let's talk about murals for a bit. I think it was last episode or the one before, we had talked about a different mailbag where somebody had sent in a website link to the potential mural that was part of the San Francisco Expo or World's Fair, where Charles Loloma was invited to paint a mural on one of the courthouse walls. And we had showed an image of what we thought the mural was, and I had mentioned I was a little confused because it looked like 3 paintings. Mm-hmm. And so Scott wrote in and clarified, and it was super helpful. He clarified that image that we showed was not the mural, that was an exhibition as part of the World's Fair, but that was not the mural that's in question in the book. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we actually have a full image of the mural, at least anywhere on the internet that I could find. And I spent quite a bit of time today looking to see if we could find that image of the mural. And Scott gave us a link to basically our closest look at it, which I'll pull up now. So this is an image we think of the mural that was maybe painted in the Treasure Island courthouse in San Francisco. And as you can see, it's not the full image. It's basically a hand and maybe some soil that the hand looks like it's planting some seeds maybe. And so unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's an electronic record that I could find of that mural. So might be a boots on the ground trip to San Francisco to get into some microfiche to see if there's an image. So if anyone's in the San Francisco area and wants to go back into your local library and see if you cannot find the mural, Charles Loloma mural, that might have been recorded in the paper during the time of the expo, I think in 1939, that would be the most epic mailbag ever. But unfortunately, this is the best we have right now, supposedly, of the Charles Loloma mural that was talked about in, I can't remember which chapter at this point. Chapter 4, potentially? No, that's the Chiffre Emerald. Anyway, sorry, I don't have that chapter off the top of my head, but the Charles Loloma chapter.
I'm glad this at least solves that mystery, and we can, feel good about what we're talking about with a mural here versus, the different the series of pieces. So yeah, that's great information to have. It makes me want that image of the mural that much more now.
Mm-hmm. But
yeah, it seems like such a prominent mural and like such an important mural. How it's like no record of it exists. That's wild. At least with that section of it, with that hand in the soil. Now we know, if we find, some obscure photo, we can identify which one we're actually looking for. We at least have that little key. Also, nowhere in the text did JCB mention that Loloma's gorgeous.
Want me to pull that picture back up, Cody, for you?
I was not picturing it. They probably said like his age best picture like a older guy and stuff, but this guy's just like a young, handsome guy.
Well, yeah. I mean, remember from the chapter, he was invited, I think, when he was 18 or 20 years old to go paint that. So that makes sense.
That's right.
Actually. All right. Thank you, Scott. I didn't know we were going to get into additional controversy, though. Second mailbag is from Mike. He had mentioned, I think we had talked about mirrors a little bit. I don't know if it has just been between us or if we talked about it on the podcast at all. But Mike was the one that sent in the picture of Scotty. He looked for the Scotty picture that's in chapter 1. Scotty, not to be confused with Scotty from Star Trek, the Bryn controversy.
Yes. So much controversy this episode.
He pointed out that when he found that image online, that it's a mirror image of the one that's in the book. And now, whether that's for aesthetics or what in the book, why it was mirrored, I don't know. The weird thing about that is the UV image of the emerald. I think it's an emerald. No, I'm not
Sapphire.
sure. A sapphire. Thank you. The sapphire from chapter 1. Also, the UV image is the picture of the sapphire that's not UV illuminated, and then above it, it looks like it's a mirror image of the UV illuminated sapphire. So there's kind of two interesting mirror images in chapter 1. And then we also had talked about the mirror illusion or mirror special effects, quote unquote, that were in the Chavin de Juntar chapter about the nails that reflect light, and had a few mirrors in the Chavin de Juntar that kind of give a psychedelic effect, let's say. So not quite sure what to make of that. I think looking out for a mirror theme, we could add that to our list to see if there's other instances, especially in a second read through. But yeah, 2 instances, 1 chapter of a mirrored image in some way seems interesting to me.
The only thing I'll note on the Scotty image is with how it is printed in the book, like his eyes are looking back into like the spine of the book, which just from a design standpoint, it would be kind of awkward if it was, I guess, the original image and he's kind of looking off his shoulder, off the page. That would just be like kind of a weird design choice. Not that he could have, I mean, he could have just put the picture on the other page, on page 22. So I don't know, maybe there's more to it, but I also think, you know, it could have just been a quick design choice of like, oh, well, let's just mirror it. It's not impacting any of the attributes of the photo.
Yeah, I agree that it could be very easily explained away as aesthetic. And the UV image, I don't quite know how that was taken and mirrored with the UV light. So yeah, I think they're explained, like they could be explained away, but something to look out for, and really appreciate Mike sending in that email.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to just like, I guess, kind of dismiss anything when it's a book filled with clues,
Right.
because if you, like, you kind of have to examine every intentional move
Mm-hmm.
to
And
decipher what is and isn't.
I think we all agreed that the Scotty image is strange. So
Yes.
bringing attention to that in some way and using that in some way to give a clue, I kind of like it because of that. So I don't know. Do with it what you will. All right. Third mailbag is from Sara. We had been talking quite a bit about the Forrest Fenn poem and the meaning of brown. And I think we had asked for some help from the audience trying to figure out what brown means in the Forrest Fenn poem associated with the Forrest Fenn box. So Sara, she mentioned she thinks brown could be a proper name, which I agree with as one potential solution. She mentioned that there is a Brown's Pass, which she says aligns with the quote, pass by where once was brown, because pass is in that sentence in the stanza. It says it's worth the high. Brown's cabin is very high up, and there's a water source and a mine near Brown's cabin. And she also wonders if there's a hot spring nearby that we could locate and see if that is potentially a partial solve here. So, anyway, I think that is good. I'm always open to tips about what interpretation of brown is, so always happy to receive messages about that. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
I do like that. I'm trying to think back. I looked up where this Brown's Pass was, and I think the one tricky part about those locations were their distance from what would be like a trailhead. So, kind of what squashed my solve that I talked through last episode or a couple episodes ago for the Forrest Fenn box, is I think it just, if you're gonna talk about like passing by a place that was once brown, I would have to imagine that's something that you're like physically passing by as you hike this trail, and I think it was just too far away.
Okay.
But I don't know. Maybe I didn't look into like the different trailheads or different ways that you can get there. I wasn't like super deep in it.
Okay. Cool. So that's our mailbag. Thanks to Sara. Thanks to Mike. Thank you to Scott. I think Scott is the same Scott that he might have debunked the page background as well as the Shutterstock. Yeah. So he's on top of it. Strong researcher. No confirmation
Scott saving
bias.
The day.
Yeah. Very, very confirmation bias proof. He is going down all the roads to make sure we're not going down the wrong path. So keep them coming, Scott. That's awesome. Should we dive into Discord detectives with Bryn?
Yes.
All right, Bryn.
All right. This Discord detective is for the Pokemon box. I would say in general, I feel like I've been kind of intentional with like staying away from Discord as much as I was before, just trying to, I don't know, kind of keep my own thoughts clear. So I took a deep dive back into the Pokemon box Discord today, and was just trying to catch up on what some of the chatter's been, and I found an image that, and I cropped the user out. I'm sorry, but I found an image that I liked, because I think we keep coming back to this idea of like, what are some of the creative ways that we can be using the book to generate clues, and like these physical ways that we can just be like creatively coming up with solutions, more with just what we are presented with in the book outside of like going down so many different Google rabbit holes. And so this was something that I thought was really interesting, just as like a thought experiment of how we can be using some keywords that stand out as strange. And so I know we had talked about the Kirk's wardrobe, Alice's looking glass. So he circles those here within the text of the book, and then below American Eagle. So those were three things that were all kind of weird and we don't have super great answers for, and presumably will be clues. And so these three words kind of they do form a triangle on the page. And then you see to the left, if you're able to see the screen, this is a location in Tennessee where there's Kirkland to the north. Down to the southeast, we have Eagleville, and southwest, it's Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, okay, I can't quite see.
Yeah, Arizona.
And it's in kind of like a similar triangle shape. I don't know, it's the proportions of triangle, to the words on the page. So basically, this user on Discord was taking these keywords and translating them into cities and then finding a location that way. So I guess I don't know if I'm like super convinced of this specifically. I would have liked to see the orientation of the triangle matching up perfectly if this is what it was going to be. But I think I wanted to present this because I do like the idea of thinking through the positions of the words in this way in the book, because we do keep, addressing the idea, like we feel like things are very intentional, as far as line breaks, pages, like he's making the words fit in the book in a very particular way. So I wanted to present this as just kind of more of like, I guess, a thought starter for us to kind of continue to think through other ways that we can be using the book.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I agree with you that I don't like it that the orientation is a little bit different between Alice and Kirk and Eagle at the bottom of the page compared to that map where it's a different order. But I think it's pretty clever that those cities were identified in somewhat of the same shape overall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in Tennessee, so I like that because that's part of the theoretical path of the road trip, certainly going south from North Carolina to Louisiana to New Orleans, over to Houston, then back up towards the Ozarks. That would take you through Tennessee to get back to North Carolina. So I'll have to get those marked on my Google map and see where they line up with the theoretical road trip. That's really cool.
Yeah, I just felt like a clever use of some keywords. It took me back to our very, very original solve for the word search. It was trying to line up words with street names. So
That's right.
it was kind of a throwback to that thought.
Nice.
I really, really, really like this.
Oh, wow.
I've not seen this.
Did you look at the picture on the screen?
Yeah.
So
that Blake just shared?
Yeah, so you can see that they're not in the right order, right?
I don't care. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that one's a triangle and the other's a triangle, like if you're just told, hey, there's these three words in the text and they happen to like be a pretty like what I think is a good sized triangle to like start narrowing in on, like on an actual map, I'd be like, oh, that's great. Like I think that it's almost leading you in the wrong direction to think, oh, they're both triangles, so it should be oriented in the text like it is geographically because they're such similar shapes. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if they were just three random words anywhere, and then you saw on a map that those three words that, like you said, are like three standout words from the text, are in like a little triangle on this route, that's really exciting. I really like this a lot.
I'm surprised that you like it so much. So
Yeah.
what about like the so in this scenario he could have just said eagle. So I
Yeah.
think, do you think he's saying American Eagle, like calling it out as a city in our American map here?
Or
Like,
just drawing attention to it with like that kind of
gotcha. Yeah.
capitalized phrasing, right? Then
Yeah.
you use a capital American Eagle and capital Kirk and capital Alice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would not get hung up on the fact that the triangles don't match each of the cities to each of like the references. I think if you just take it as those three words are on that page, that's like I like that a lot. It's probably like my favorite third party thing I've seen.
What? I'm
Yeah.
shocked by that. All right. Well, I'm
No,
glad
I
I
like
presented
it.
it.
Yeah, I really like it.
Buy tickets now.
There's a lot that like but there's just a lot that just seems just right. Like the fact that it's, I mean, clearly no one's arguing that those three things, like those three words, the Kirks, Alice's, and American Eagle, would like line up with Kirkland, Arizona, Eagleville, but it's also not so similar that you'd like type the three words out of the text into Google and it would pop up with this map. It's like, it seems to me that if I was trying to drop hints, it's like just the right amount of hint too. I don't know. There's a lot that I secretly really like about this, or not so secretly.
Not a secret.
Not so
Yeah.
secret.
No, yeah, that's interesting. When was that posted? I didn't see that.
I think that was 3 or 4 days ago.
Really?
Somewhat recently, yeah.
Everything gets so buried so quickly on the Discord.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
I can see how at first glance you'd be like, oh, that's kind of a neat coincidence, but I really like that a lot.
All right. We'll start honing in on that area to see if other clues match up.
I'm logging off. I'm gonna go research.
Okay. Bye. Cool. All right. Obviously a very hit Discord detectives, Bryn. Well found. Should we dive in?
I apologize for not having the username.
Yeah, we'll try to unbury that and see who is posting about that. Ready for coincidence of the day? All right, coincidence of the day is a coincidence of the day plus mailbag hybrid, since we are running low on coincidences of the day. We can't force them. So you guys need to go to the Pokemon machine again, Pokemon vending machine, to see if we can generate a new coincidence of the day. This coincidence of the day is from Brian in Oregon. He said he appreciates our enthusiasm for the jar of flies. So this has to do with the Coltrane Pokemon box discussion that we've been having over the past few episodes. And he mentioned that this might be a coincidence of the day, so that's why I felt like I could put it in here. He mentioned the jar of flies. You'll find that the screaming result, if you just Google jar of flies, is a studio album from Alice in Chains. And so he highlights that this is another Alice connection. So we have Alice Coltrane, Alice in Chains, and we have what we were actually just looking at, which was the Alice through the looking glass in the Pokemon chapter. So 3 instances that can be connected to Alice. And he says could be a coincidence of the day, question mark. So that's why I want to put it in this section. So just one more piece of Alice connection, let's say, based on the jar of flies clue. So different interpretation based on the album name from the band Alice in Chains. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think some people are really running with that and using like that method and dismissing the Coltrane circle because of that. And so I think it's kind of becoming a fork in the road for, I guess, really progressing with the solve, because you're going to have to kind of choose a route if you're choosing to go one of those 2 ways. So personally, I guess I haven't looked too deep into what that all could, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Brian.
what that could lead down, but
Brian did mention that there's a couple cities named Alice, but maybe weren't as close to the theoretical road trip path as might be useful. But yeah, you could go down that route. I think Cody would, because there's a fork in the road, Cody would obviously take the path less traveled, but I don't know what path that is at this point.
yeah, I guess in general, I still really like the Coltrane circle as the solve for jar of flies. So personally, that is the route that I will be continuing with.
Yes. But as mentioned, might be coincidence. Cool. Should we dive into the chapter content now? So we are going to be covering chapter 17 in There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black. This is called George Washington's Jelly Glass. And the subtitle is Share Your Story. And there's 2 quotes here. The first is from Madison Taylor. Every person on this planet has a story to tell, something that makes them unique, adding to the whole. And the second quote from Philip Hum. Through the art of storytelling, we can preserve our heritage, educate future generations, and inspire change. And I did not actually do the research on who these people were. Anybody can bail me out here.
Ooh, good thing Bryn did the research.
Oh, good, Bryn.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Did you not, Cody?
No, I did. I was actually also joking because I figured you didn't.
Oh, yeah, go. You can go ahead. My notes, I feel like I'm happy to, but I did not like dive into it. So go ahead.
Madison Taylor is an author and self-help personality who specializes in New Thought spirituality.
Okay.
Which is happy thoughts heal you. I mean,
okay.
generally, it's obviously a oversimplification, I'm sure, but these are 30,000 foot views of who these people are.
36,000
or
foot view.
36,000 foot views of who these people are. The other one, Philip Hum, was a businessman turned artist. And one of the things that he did that's on like, it's just his Wikipedia page is like this big art. I forget what the word. It's a fancy German word for like a special piece of art that's like a ton of different art. That's all reference. It's like all one thing though. That was about Johann Wolfgang van Goethe's Faust 1 and Faust 2. And I went way too into the weeds and ended up like basically not reading the actual thing, but reading like spark notes of Goethe's Faust 1 and Faust 2 and got really into it, and then read cliff notes of some reference materials or like other French epic stories like that. And it ended up being more for my own interest than for the treasure hunt at that point. But that was like a many degrees separation at that point by the time I was looking into that kind of stuff. But that's who they are.
You got to stick with Mad Magazine, I think.
I will say, to kind of summarize the very highest level of these two, it feels like both were kind of prominent in like questioning the societal norms. With like Madison's book, I think what she was most known for was a book called Unmedicated, like what Cody was saying. And then I know Philip's work was kind of pushing back on like just kind of blindly adhering to technology and just trying to create these alternative ways of thought approaches. So to me, that felt like kind of what connected the two of them.
Okay. Yeah, I guess these quotes are about storytelling. I don't know if, obviously, the Philip Hum seemed like he was pretty connected to storytelling if he made an art exhibit about Faust. And but yeah, I didn't quite find the connection for Madison Taylor, I guess. But anyway, the quotes stand on their own, I think, as representations of why storytelling is important. And again, the subtitle is Share Your Story. All right, let me get into a quick chapter summary. Jon Collins-Black starts out talking about stories are worth telling. And sharing our stories is a way to generate communal joy. He then goes into a vignette about studying American history in 4th grade and learning about American history through this large textbook. And learning about George Washington and the story about him cutting down the cherry tree. And when his father asked him who cut down this cherry tree, George Washington said, "I cannot tell a lie." And that is like, I don't know. I've heard that many times growing up. I'm sure you guys have as well. And that's kind of like common knowledge that that's a famous story about George Washington. And turns out that that was just fully invented by a George Washington author, biography author named Mason Locke Weems. And that particular story about cutting down the cherry tree supposedly was not included until the 5th edition of that biography that he wrote. So supposedly that's all fabricated and was a story to bolster the biography and, you know, potentially increase sales. And it got incorporated into textbooks as fact at a later time. Jon Collins-Black says that George Washington could actually stretch the truth, even though he was a man of convictions. And he says that there's actually plenty of legitimate information about George Washington that you could reference instead of maybe that biography, because the kind of forefathers, American leaders, early American leaders, all kept like very detailed journals, seemingly. And so you can actually just go back to the original source and get good information directly from the famous historical figures themselves. Jon Collins-Black also highlights maybe more sobering facts about George Washington. There's kind of a juxtaposition here. So he talks about George Washington owning, I think it's 317 slaves, and not really having moral qualms with that and wondering why a slave would want to run away. And he also talks about George Washington acquiring heavy debts in order to own the finest furniture. So a couple of, I don't know, a little bit of shade at George Washington. And then in the next paragraph, he talks about George Washington as the closest thing to a living superhero our country had seen. So I thought that was kind of odd juxtaposition, as I said. He talks about George Washington surviving polio, scarlet fever, malaria, tuberculosis, smallpox, and that's not even the complete list. There was a bunch of undiagnosed ailments that he suffered from as well because of supposedly bad genetics, I guess. And then we dive into George Washington, like surviving a bunch of battles as well over the course of at least 8 years during the American Revolution. He was a commander and a soldier during the French and Indian War, and then a commander during the Revolutionary War, but he would never stand at the back, right? He was always at the front lines, even when he was a commander. And Jon Collins-Black says he wore like very colorful regalia and was shot at constantly by the British and never was, killed by incoming fire. So that's kind of why he's making that connection to being a superhero, because he seemed invincible. And supposedly there was a lot of articles written about this, both in the US and in England during this time. He talks about the story of Washington crossing the Delaware, where they ambushed a German soldier unit under the cover of night and very cold. And supposedly the German soldiers were even warned by citizens that were empathetic to the British cause, and they didn't believe those warnings, and the ambush was successful. Jon Collins-Black calls George Washington a live action hero, and then we dive into a little bit of history about the jelly glass that's part of this treasure. So it's a little dessert glass that has a wax seal that George Washington put on there, where he put wax seals on some of his most prized possessions. There's 2 of these jelly glasses that exist today. One, I think, in the Mount Vernon Museum, and then this one, which he acquired. The one that's in the treasure box, and we don't know which treasure box it's in, supposedly has been through quite the rounds of different museums over the course of history. Jon Collins-Black recommends reading Washington, A Life, which is a biography written by Ron Chernow. So that might be a hint at something that might be interesting reading material, or it might just be very historical and interesting generally. Don't know if it's necessarily a hint. Jon Collins-Black then says we don't have to be founding fathers to have our stories resonate with other people. And Jon Collins-Black wants people to share their stories about the hunt and to document your adventures while looking for these treasures that he has hidden. He wraps up by saying storytelling helps us express our mutual humanity. And that's about it. Any comments or questions or thoughts about this chapter generally?
I will say I hope that, I think when Cody says he can't find much, you typically do, Blake, and I will say I also felt like this was a pretty light chapter. So
really?
You found a bunch of stuff?
Oh, I've got nuggets galore. I got a gold mine.
I knew
It's
it.
so funny. Both
Cody
and I
earlier.
were like, this is just such a nothing chapter as far as clues.
Wow.
Yeah, Bryn told me earlier, she's like, I feel like I can't find anything substantial in this chapter. And I said, yeah, when I first looked at it, I thought it was pretty light too. And you know what that means? That means Blake found everything.
That's funny.
I've found some goodies that I think are interesting. I think it's like most of my nuggets, though, that I don't know what to make of them yet. But I think there are two interesting things particularly that we'll cover probably right now. Ready for nuggets? Forrest Fenn's Picked Nuggets?
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear.
Okay, do you want me to go first, or do you want me to save my goodies for last?
I think let's save yours for last.
All right, let's see if we have any overlap then to start with.
All right. Um, I will give mine. So my nugget is the picture of the cherry tree on page 153. Um, which I know we kind of continue to talk about probably AI images that can read a little weird. I think this one stands out to me as being extra odd because it's like in this moleskin journal, um, as if it's been like sketched here in this journal on a desk. You can kind of see the pencil above it. And then there's this, I guess, like cherry kind of sitting off to the left-hand side of the sketch as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I guess I don't understand that. Yes, the picture is weird. I mean, maybe there's like a number one down in the dirt. So there's some
Mm-hmm.
weird things to look into. But I also like, can't figure out like what are these characters in the lower left-hand corner of the journal sketch as well. It's like maybe UBHT
Mm-hmm.
is maybe the letters that I see down there. Yes, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts initially on what this scenario means as far as this journal and illustration of the cherry tree.
Yeah, I don't have any good answers for that. I didn't find much in that image. I think the UBHT is how I would read that too, in the little initials in the bottom left. And I also saw the number one potentially in there too. But I don't really have good information about what that might mean, particularly if it's a single number and it's number
Right.
one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what's driving me the most nuts is like, what is this little cherry, like a ceramic cherry? I don't know. What is that doing off to the side here?
Yeah.
To me, it's like, well, this has to be a clue, and I guess I just don't know how to use it yet.
Cody, do you have thoughts on this at all?
No. These AI images, I don't know. I think I need to take a break from the AI image thing. It's just,
But even outside of this being an AI, like it's still an intentional choice to have this sketched in a journal
Huh.
with this little cherry thing sitting there. Like he could have easily just used this image as an image itself, but
Why is it
yeah,
in a
maybe I need to
journal?
play around with some AI image generators and see what they spit out to give me to help me calibrate what I'm looking for, what's reasonable to expect from AI. Like if he just typed in, you know, uh, photo of a drawing of a single cherry on a tree, like would it spit out this whole thing, you think?
Yeah, I
I kind
think
of think it, yeah, I kind of think it would.
generally when you're using at least the tools I've used before, it will give you like 4 image choices, and if you want to just
Yeah.
regenerate them over and over again until you get something that's appealing, like you can. So I think it's certainly possible that this is AI generated, and he said draw a picture of a cherry tree in a journal, because that is, one point in the chapter about how a lot of these American historical figures were heavily into journaling, and that's how we get a lot of the information today.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. The
I
the shadows on the photo make me question whether that's AI generated or not. They look pretty crisp in a good way.
Yeah, and the book on the right also looks, I don't know, a bit suspect, but then depending on the perspective, it does look like it could be a real book. But I
Yeah.
think this is the least AI-ish
Yeah.
generated AI art so far.
So my take is the possible UBHT I find interesting. The one in the drawing is just I'm
You're
I'm
not
not
buying
saying
it.
it's wrong. I'm not saying it's not a clue. I'm just saying I'm not investing time into it.
Yeah.
The hey, I think I find numbers and all these scribbly AI things. I don't know. At that point, it's on the same level to me as taking all the letters from the word search and just mixing them up however you want, saying I'm coming up with phrases.
Okay. You're not a
Just
boggle. You're not a
you can make
boggle guy,
anything. You
right?
can make anything happen with if you're looking for Numbers and scratches.
Okay.
That's
Cool.
just my take, though. Maybe that's like the biggest hint in the whole book is that there's a one on the cherry tree.
I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think we can just be dismissing the photos in the book because you don't like them.
I
They're
know, it's just
obviously
exhausting. It's exhausting.
cannot be burdened to look at the clues. Oh no.
I think what's so tough for me is like I think they're I think it's like macroscopically book wide, either the images are clues or the images aren't clues. And that's why I'm having so much heartburn over like investing all this time trying to find these little clues in the images. If it's like, if there's a 50-50 shot that just none of them are anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I
not
guess
like, it's not like what clues are right and what clues are wrong in the images, but I might just be like spending all this time looking at photos that just none of them, it's all just in the text. I don't know.
yeah.
My head's spinning.
I guess I think it would be pretty crazy to put images in a book and not have them be clues.
Yeah, I mean, in interviews, Jon Collins-Black has been asked, like, what's important in the book? Is it just in the text? And he says the whole book is important. So to me, that means probably there is some clues in the images. Maybe not all of them, maybe not this one. But I think certainly my opinion is there is things we need to garner from some of these images.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking about the Scotty image, and I think that's a clue.
Yeah, I mean,
But
there's obviously a
that one's
difference
not like
between
an AI
photographs,
one.
That's
photographs,
different,
and
yeah.
AI illustration.
I think like the card, not cartoony, but whatever you'd call this, like the sketch style ones. Those are the ones I'm kind of just like more frustrated with than enjoying.
Okay.
Yeah, the sketch ones. But yeah, I agree that there's other photos in there, like the Scotty one that almost certainly is a clue in my mind. I would also say I'd be hesitant interpreting JCB's comments on stuff like, hey, is it just the text or are there other things? And I'm saying it's the whole book. Anytime where he's being asked a question that would narrow things down in some way and he's vague, I'd be careful interpreting that as, okay, then if he's not willing to narrow it down, then whatever he's not narrowing down is obviously a clue. Because I think that if I was in his shoes, I mean, I'm sure he's being asked so many questions by so many people all the time. I think it just would have to be a hard and fast rule if anyone's asking you to narrow things down in any way that you always say, you always leave it open as much as possible.
Okay. The whole book is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think I've seen a few. I'm trying to think of other examples off the top of my head, but a few instances where he's asked a question that would narrow things down in some way, and he's kind of not said no, but like just kept it open and just refused to narrow it down. And then I've been tempted to interpret that as, okay, whatever he's not narrowing down, that's important. And the more instances of this happening, the more I'm thinking he's just taking that hard stance to just never narrow things down.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And I think my personal stance is it would be crazy to not layer in clues with the illustrations.
All right. Cody Nuggets.
That was a heated FFPN. Let's see here. I got two that are pretty equal here. I think I'm gonna go with I'll go with the quote one. Storytelling weaves a quilt that blankets us all.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, and I actually wrote this down as you were doing your recap because when you said it, it made me think of that, my main FFPN, which is that he acquired heavy debts in order to buy the finest things, which I think could also potentially be pointing you towards like maybe not so much focus on the first quote. Storytelling weaves the quilt that blankets us all. That seemed like, again, what I say about most of my FFPNs, just strange phrasing that kind of drew my attention to that part of the text. So then I looked into quilts, because it seems like he's kind of just drawing the reader to the idea of a quilt in a strange way. There is a Martha Washington, obviously George Washington's wife, star quilt block, which is like a specific quilting design that's attributed to her, named after her, or in recognition of her, one of the above. Um, I don't know if that really gets us anywhere, but I thought it was interesting that he's talking about quilts and that she obviously was like involved in the quilting community of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I also, because when I was reading this, I had World's Fair on my mind. I looked at like World's Fair quilts, and I found there was something. Where was it? Let's see here. There's a Mary Gasperick's original design quilt in 1939. Um, it was designed to commemorate the New York World's Fair, and it looks interesting. But I think what I found doing my quilting research, what I found most interesting were a couple of kind of famous-ish quilts by Harriet Powers. And the reason that I find these, they're like famous quilts, and the reason I find them more interesting than some of the other quilting stuff I've looked at is is that they were done in a style that like depicted some real world events.
Okay.
And potentially like some real world locations. So she had a Bible quilt from 1886 and a pictorial quilt from 1898. I probably didn't write down enough about them, but each one of them is kind of broken up into squares, and each square like clearly represents a specific historical event or biblical event. So I thought that those quilts were specifically interesting because they have the potential, more than just like a checkered pattern or something, to like provide a hint on a location or a further, like some sort of further reading. They're all pretty loose ties, but I thought the quilt thing was interesting.
Yeah.
For someone deep in quilt culture, you're pretty quick to dismiss the illustrations.
That's good. No, I like that. I picked up on that as being odd phrasing as well, actually, Cody. It's not my pick nugget, but I do appreciate the deep dive into that. Especially, I didn't even think about the Martha Washington quilting connection there. I like that a lot. All right. Should I go into my first one here?
Yes.
Yes, please.
So it's all about the superhero theme, actually, in this chapter. And caveat this first by saying maybe this is all related to painting George Washington as the most legitimate, most closest thing to an American superhero that we have. But I thought there was other instances, that a lot of phrases that relate back to that, and I'll go through some of them here. So he mentions superhero, he mentions live action hero, he mentions a heroic figure, he mentions mythological. And then I think the more interesting stuff is he has this story about Lee. Let me find Charles Lee, who was supposed to lead this attack from the backside. So George Washington was on the front line. Charles Lee was supposed to go on the back line and ended up retreating. But I don't quite know why that particular story was in there. And he mentions Lee just by last name. And that makes me think of Stan Lee, who's famous for Spider-Man. And then there's a quote in here that says, "English and American soldiers marveled alike." And that is weird phrasing and makes me think of Marvel Comics. We've seen Marvel in a couple other instances. So once, I think in Joy's Serenade. No, sorry, in the Forrest Fenn poem, there's a Marvel gaze. So that's one instance. And then I can't remember where the second instance was. There's another Marvel gaze, I think, somewhere in the rest of the text. And then there's also a mention of George Washington's origin story, which is like big connection to comics. It's always about the character's origin story. So there's multiple ways that this could just be the theme of the chapter as George Washington as a superhero, right? But then the Marvel and the Lee, and then there's a mention of flipping the script in that same paragraph, which makes me think of movies as well. Flip the script. So is he trying to point us into some sort of clue in this chapter, or at least this section about Charles Lee, that we can get some solid clue out of this superhero theme? Because I don't think we see a superhero theme in any of the other parts of the book. It's really focused to this chapter. But I think there might be something there if we can decipher it based on all. It seems like a lot of coincidences with the Marvel stuff, particularly Marvel Lee flipping the script origin story that just like screamed superhero theme to me.
That's really good. I mean, I kind of picked up on like, I guess, a few things individually, but did not tie it all together. And now that you're saying it, I'm like, wow, that feels, how did I not see that? It feels pretty obvious. I really like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you win
Also,
FFPNs for tonight. That's
yeah.
a really strong one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
It's
like that
not
a
a-
lot. And I also, there's, as much as I love the book wide themes that we're finding, and like some of them seem like very strong, and like we're gonna develop some good theories associated with those themes as we keep reading. As much as I like that, I like how chapter specific this specific one is, because it feels like, is we can a chunk we can bite off and maybe look into more and see if we can figure out exactly what he's pointing to. That's not just like overwhelming by being another book wide theme. So I think that I'm pretty convinced. Man, maybe I'm just in like a much less skeptical mood tonight than usual, but I'm pretty convinced that there's something there that to be found. And I like to spend some time looking at it. I like that FFPN a lot.
Yeah, I agree that I like that it feels more approachable as like a chapter solve potentially. And I think it gives me hope that maybe other chapters can kind of be broken down in similar ways. That I think overall I continue to try to tie everything together as a book versus accepting that maybe a chapter can be a chapter in itself. And so I would, on the next pass through the book, I would definitely like to keep that more front of mind as well, trying to think through, do some of these themes just apply to this chapter, and is that okay?
You know what else I really like that I'm just thinking of right now is one of like the references to something JCB said directly that really stood out to me was when he was talking about the what do we call them, the subtitles of every chapter, and saying that those
Mhm.
are important, focus on those. I like that, the subtitle of this chapter is the share your story. And I feel like that also connects really strongly with like a Stan Lee comic book superhero kind of um, chapter specific hint.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I kind of came to the same conclusion that you made, Bryn, about taking a different approach to the chapters completely. Because I think I've also been stuck in the rut that how are all these chapters connected? And this is kind of the first instance where I think, I don't know, maybe the chapters individually give you a set of clues instead of themes across chapters. So agree 100% going back and taking a chapter for itself and finding the clue in the chapter might be one more way we could look at this moving forward.
It'd be really nice if we had a chapter that was kind of this like a nice big meatball where we just like figured out and we felt really confident. Hey, we figured out the clue for the chapter,
Like the
just to like give us
Hopi
a,
calendar, for example.
yeah, just to give
Mhm.
us a jumping off point of like, or like some background information on what exactly we're looking for, like to what extent are the clues hidden. And I feel like even if we had like, say there's 23 clues, one for each chapter, if we had the first one, it would just it's almost like an allegory for finding the first out of the 5 boxes. It
Mhm.
just like gives you that background information to know what it is you're looking for. Because that's the
Yeah.
hardest part right now. Is just knowing like what I don't even know what output to expect. Like even if I know all the inputs that go into the clue, it's like, am I looking for a single word? Am I looking for a number? Am I looking for a phrase or a year? It's just how do you narrow it down to just one thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed. We don't have much structure to this, so structure would be nice. Hence, we like the word search.
Exactly. That's why so many people gravitate to that.
Do either of you feel like you're particularly savvy with superhero culture? Because I am definitely not.
Not too
No.
much, but I don't think, and again, big caveat here, this is just a idea. I don't know if there's anything to this other than trying to make a superhero theme for the chapter, but I would assume that you could probably do minimal research, or it should be something fairly well known if it's going to be superhero related, that you should be able to piece together without hopefully doing a bunch of watching 24 hours of Marvel movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like picking up on like the origin story aspect kind of I probably just need to like refamiliarize myself with like some of these just common themes throughout um these stories.
All right, what else you guys got?
I have a quote that I find particularly interesting. It was, "We might have been left with nothing but fairy tales to inform us of how our country came to be." And I think this was referencing like if the founding fathers or whoever isn't um, documenting personal history, this the importance of journaling and all those different documentation of different stories. So calling out fairy tales here felt interesting and kind of brought me back to the Rumpelstiltskin conversation that we had. And like, I mean, we have the, Alice thread throughout.
Okay.
So it just seemed like an interesting comparison
I
that
had that
also
one
just
too.
doesn't really make sense. Fairy tales to inform us, like why would we even be comparing things back to fairy tales?
Yeah, I had the same one written down. I was trying to choose between that and my quilting theme for my main FFPN. But yeah, this um, I read this chapter coming right off the heels about talking about fairy tales and fairy tale themes in the last chapter, and then he actually uses the word fairy tales in this one. And again, like you mentioned, in like a strange standing out kind of way. So yeah, I'm I'm all in on. Again, this is now another book theme, not a chapter theme, but it seems like a lot of references to fairy tales. I looked up. It seems like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales are kind of like the the standard ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked those up. A, there's a ton of them, so many. And B, I read through a couple of them. They're wild. They're just wild, man. Uh, so I don't think I'm going to read all the fairy tales, but I think there's something there with another book wide fairy tale theme.
Cody.
Another
Oh, go
oh, go
ahead,
ahead,
Bryn.
Cody.
Sorry. No.
Another quote I liked were, "These treasures we all seek are not a zero-sum game,"
Mm-hmm.
which just felt like it was kind of tying in these numbers and how we're trying to use numbers throughout the book. So zero sum seemed like a very intentional choice.
Yeah. Can I hop in here, because that's kind of related to my second FFPN, which is a little bit looser, I would say, but I quote that particular line, and a few others as well. Thinking about numbers, this chapter seems to be very number heavy to me. Um, and there's a couple other things that I wanted to point out in terms of a potential number solve here. There's a mention of strictly statistical, I think that had to do with George Washington's survivability in battles. He refused to die, DIE, but in my context, I'm thinking of that as like a rolling dice. Because later it says Washington was rolling the dice when he was talking about this basically two-sided attack with Charles Lee. There's a quote played, and I actually just have the word played in quotes here. I don't know where it was in the chapter. I'll have to go back and find that. And then zero-sum game. And so the mention of dice twice, let's say once and a half, because he says rolling the dice, but then he also says refuse to die. Maybe. And then strictly statistical. That really stood out to me, and in combination as a lot of words associated with numbers, statistics, probability, maybe. And then there's just so many numbers in here. 4th, 1st, 9, 10, 1st, 5th, 183, 6th, 317, 67, 5, 1, 1776, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2/3, 8, 1778, 2nd, 5,000, 1 first, 1, 2, 1, 2, 10, tens of thousands, 1, 1, 100. I don't have a formula for that, but I don't know. Those keywords stuck out to me as something that was really numbers associated with this chapter. So that one, as I mentioned, is much looser, but did stick out to me. So just expanding on your zero-sum game, Bryn.
Yeah, sorry, I'm now realizing I kind of just barged in with all my quotes.
No, that's fine.
Before letting everybody take their FFPNs. Yeah, especially when you think of all those numbers in the context of like 6 text pages in this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a really great connection. I guess I'm struggling to think through like how, and maybe it doesn't have to tie in with like the superhero thing. It could just be independent in itself.
Yeah, so between those two, superhero and numbers, I like don't necessarily know what to do again with those things, other than it caught my eye as like super heavy right out of the gate with a lot of numbers.
Interesting.
Cody, your turn.
I've got one more. I mean, the other ones I touched on were kind of my main ones. This one's just been kind of tingling in the back of my mind. It's one of those ones where I expected someone else to say it, and then I'd say, "Oh, I was thinking that too, and I didn't write it down." And it's one of the ones you just mentioned with the numbers. It's the as if George Washington had a sixth sense.
Okay.
His life was playing out in a defining role. That's like one of the first parts of the chapter that jumped out to me as a sixth sense reference. And again, I mean, it's another one of just like the way it's phrased jumps out at me, but I don't really have anything to go off of there. Obviously, potential movie reference.
Yeah. So the sixth sense, that's where I started going down the numbers rabbit hole. That's the one that caught my eye
That's
first.
when you started thinking.
I went back and I was like,
putting numbers in here.
He said 4th grade, then he said 1st, and then he said 5th, and then he said 6th. And so then that's how I went down the rabbit hole, and I couldn't find any rhyme or reason to those. And beyond like the number words that end in th, 6th, for example, 5th, 4th, I couldn't find more going through the chapter. But yes, that was as he says, the spidey sense tingle is when I saw that 6th, because he had mentioned 4th grade much earlier, and then I found a few more instances. So
the numbers are just so overwhelming. I mean,
but I don't know. I'd be more focused on what you're saying about like operations, mathematical operations, because there's been other chapters that have been super number heavy too, and it seems like he's almost treating this half as like history book. And I think if you open any history book, there's going to be a million numbers.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of two minds on the numbers, especially specific to this chapter.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of my feelings towards this are similar to yours to the AI images. It's like it's too overwhelming. Like, can there really be anything in here that's discernible? Because there's just too many. So I'm not too keen on it, but anyway, I thought I'd point it out just because I thought it was super numbers heavy, this chapter in particular.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got one more. This is more of a flake, but there's a quote here that says, inside it were pictures. So he's talking about the history textbook. Inside it were pictures of scrolled documents, men with white wigs pondering above brown desks, and battalions standing in large fields of green grass. And so just in that one sentence, there's 3 mentions of colors, the white, brown, and green. I don't know if he's just trying to paint a picture of like your typical history book illustrations that maybe are drab, right? White wigs, brown desks, green grass. But it stuck out to me as maybe there's a hint of a clue in there that's color related.
Mm-hmm.
Not too happy with that one, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I guess what stands out to me would be the green grass. I mean, the white wigs, brown desk, I think feel odd, but then to say green grass is just like, well, what are you really trying to like paint a picture of there?
Right.
That feels unnecessary. So I think as a whole, that all feels odd together.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is odd. I don't know how you make a clue out of white, green, and brown. Is my problem. But anyway, I thought it was interesting to have all of those colors together.
Do you have any other flakes, or I can rattle off a couple more quotes too.
Nope, I'm done.
It becomes easier to see ourselves in his reflections. I think this was maybe top of mind, talking about like the mirrored images.
Yeah.
So reflections stood out to me.
Okay.
We had the quote, "Turned the tide of the war."
Yes.
So that felt like it was pulling in some themes. He references, is it the author, the biography author also wrote Hamilton's biography, which was then used to create the musical.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like that was a tie to music.
Okay.
And then I also just added the rose patterned jelly glass as just like our botanical note.
I totally missed that one. Good, Bryn.
So
Good.
Those are everything on my list. I guess kind of revisiting here, at least I feel like I had a few more things than what I originally concluded the chapter with, where it felt like it was kind of a lot of nothing. Which I don't know, maybe I'm going to be more excited to have chapters that I don't feel like are that great, because then you guys find all the good stuff.
One of these times we're all just going to have 0 FFPNs if we rely on that. Cool.
Did you have anything else, Cody?
No, that covered all mine.
All right. Should we do a theme recap? I don't know if you have that handy, Cody. Sorry.
I do have it, yeah.
Okay.
Music.
Check. Hamilton.
Yeah. Fatherhood.
Well, the cherry tree, cutting down the cherry tree.
Oh, yeah.
Wind.
I forgot about that part altogether.
Wind theme. Not that I caught, no.
World's Fair.
Ooh. Maybe Washington, D.C. hosts a World's Fair? I'll have to look into that.
Maybe
or
quilt bridge to World's Fair?
Quilt competitions, yeah. Philadelphia was mentioned. We'll have to look into that. So, question mark on that one, I would say.
Trademarked. Transcending Circumstances.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's light, but there is the paragraph about all the ailments he suffered from and bad genetics.
Stretch he also didn't start out, like he wasn't born as like royalty potential president. I mean, he battled and overcame not dying 100 different times to become president of the United States.
Fair. And he won the Washington Cross in the Delaware battle against the German mercenaries.
Yeah. Flowers / botanical.
Rose jelly glass.
Nice, Bryn.
Water
Good catch.
/ salt water.
Rising tide.
And crossing the Delaware. And feminism.
No.
I don't know if there's any mention of a woman at all in this chapter.
I was going to say the same thing. Did they mention Martha, or did I just do all of my
You
research
did it.
on
You
Martha?
did. You made that connection. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Celestial.
No, other than talking about the night of the Delaware crossing, I can't think of anything else. That'd be a stretch.
Hand theme. Bryn's trademark.
I did not pick up any hand themes.
No hand theme.
And ring theme. Any rings?
Oh, I forgot about the ring theme.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about the ring thing a couple episodes ago.
I know.
I still am, but
Yeah, nothing that's.
we don't want to force them.
Obvious here. Not that I picked up on. No.
That's
All
it.
right. That's an episode.
I want to add that there was a Philadelphia World's Fair. It was the first to be held in the United States,
Okay.
1876.
Nice. All right. There's hope. World's Fair theme. Check. All right. Cool. I think that was a fruitful discussion. Still more questions than answers, certainly, but I like that we're thinking about potentially solving the chapters in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Something to keep in mind. So we'll see moving forward and then going back whether that comes to fruition at all. But
if we just even get one chapter that we just feel good about, it would like open up so much.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment, Cody, that there's one solve that we're at least partially happy with. It gives us a little bit of structure. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Again, if you have tips, questions, comments about the podcast, feel free to email tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com. Looking forward to more messages and catching up on the inbox that I neglected the last week or so. So thanks, everybody, for your patience, and thanks for listening. Good night.
Talk about how excited you are for the next episode, Blake.
I'm very excited.
Favorite box.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the deep dive in the past and future box. I'm going to try to be as succinct and clear as possible with the main goal of getting people up to speed on the current status of, I'd say, the most accepted solves at this point for the past, or at least for the word search. I'm excited about our discussion of the chapter text as well, because I think a lot of people do just focus on the word search, but I think there's nuggets that we can get out of the chapter text as well that we need. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that very much, and hopefully, we'll see how long that episode is, but all right, have a good night.
Searching for clues, let's find you.